Hey everyone. All right, so I'm not going to do what Patrick did and make you all stand up and clap today, but I would like to know who would like to volunteer to, who runs a SaaS and would like to volunteer for a quick 1-minute exercise? Somebody runs a SaaS in here. No one, any of you involved in software? No, all right. I think I'm at the wrong conference. No. Seriously, anyone want to, all right. So, convince me to use your SaaS in a sentence or two.
So you run an e-commerce company?
Sure.
Strong brand?
Yeah.
Yep. You're putting in a lot of work convincing customers to buy your product.
Okay.
And doing nothing with them once you have them.
If you were to go through immigration and the customs officer asked you what you do, would you have said that same thing to them?
No.
Would you have said the same thing to your parents about if they asked you what you did? No. Okay, so you in a way personalized your messaging to me, knowing that I'm in technology, I know what e-commerce means, and so on. So that's going to be the premise of today, is that many of us, we have one-size-fits-all marketing, and if you saw my talk last year at, thank you, by the way. If you saw my talk last year at LTV Conf, it was more theoretical than this one's going to be. So what I'm going to be talking about today is we launched Right Message a few months back, January 23rd, and we've collected a lot of data in the meantime, and a lot of data from customers of ours who are leveraging personalization in the way that they sell and generate leads and so on. And what I want to do is I want to share 5 different strategies or patterns that we've seen, and I want to share the data behind it, because I know for a lot of people, they're not doing anything like this yet, and a lot of the objections, if you will, are things like, is it worth my effort? Is it worth the effort to go and get up and running with something like personalization? So that's what we're going to be focusing on. So it's all the rage. Inevitably, if you've read any marketing blog in the last year or two, you've seen something about the future trends of e-commerce personalization or whatever else. So a lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of buzz about personalization online. However, there's not much tactical, here's what to do, here's how to do it, and so on. It's a bit of a new frontier, because if you think about it, since really the dawn of time, we've all been personalizing. I mean, we've all, if I'm speaking with you over the phone, I'm trying to convince you to go to LTV Conf, I'm going to use examples, I'm going to use language that would resonate with you and what I think about you. If I'm trying to convince anyone to do anything, I mean, we take into account who is this person, what do we know about them, how are they behaving, and so on, and we modify our message. Online, we've always kind of operated like our websites are a bit like a brochure. So you have a homepage, you have a services page, you have a sales page, you have all these different pages. And they're effectively static, right? They're effectively saying the same exact thing to everyone. So what I want to do is I want to cover, like I was saying, 5 different strategies that really do work. And I'm going to show you why they work, both conceptually but also with a lot of data. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have some ideas that you can use pretty immediately to go and start to increase the number of leads your website's generating for you, the number of subscribers that are turning into customers, and the number of customers that come back for more. So anyone follow Samuel or know who he is? User onboard? Okay, a few of us. He had this tweet a few months back where he said, dude, the more I research UX personalization, the more I'm having a user onboarding in 2013 vibes all over again. There's so little out there, and this is going to be such a big deal soon. Somebody follows up and says, where should I look to start reading? And his reply is literally a Google search. There's not a lot of content out there just yet. Now, we at Right Message, we're trying to fix this or help fix this. But for the most part, it is a bit of a new frontier. It's a bit of a, not a lot of people know really what to do. So what I want to preface this talk with is what personalization is not, or what it is, how it's much more than what you see up on your screen. Now, a lot of email marketing software, they talk about personalization. We can personalize your emails. We can do this. We can do that. A lot of CRM software does the same thing. Yet when they say personalized, they're talking about mail merging. which isn't new. I mean, this is just being able to say hello first name or hello, first name of company or something like that. And that's the extent of things. The problem is this isn't sufficient. This is variable injection into templates, into email templates in this case. What we're going to do is, like I said, we're going to talk through 5 different strategies that you can use to basically provide a holistic end-to-end experience for your subscribers, leads, customers, and so on. Quickly, a bit about me. Co-founder of Right Message. I've got the other co-founders in the room in the back, Shai. I'm founder of PlanScope, which I sold through FE in 2016. Also the founder of WFreelancing.com, which is a 50,000 person community of freelancers and consultants. And I was here last year too. Oh, sorry. Delay. Okay. So the first strategy I'm going to cover is how to generate more leads by looking at where somebody came from and what can we infer based on how we acquired somebody. So, I don't know why this isn't. Sorry. Okay. I participated in an online summit about a month and a half ago. And Tom Works, who's a friend of mine, was organizing this. And he had people who had audiences, so myself and a few others, promote his online summit. Now, have you ever been on the receiving end of an obvious joint venture affiliate email campaign? Probably. Typically, what ends up happening is I promote Tom's event, and I get some sort of kickback if people end up buying from that event. When I wrote to my list about Tom's event, so my list is mainly made up of freelancers. I talked about, his event was about how you can build and sell a 100K plus product. So how do you launch a product successfully? The concern I had with Tom was my audience typically doesn't have products. They're freelancers. They're selling their time. They're selling services. This isn't going to be applicable for them. But he was talking about, well, there's going to be a lot of talks that help people come up with products and validate them and so on. So when I promoted it to my audience, I talked about that. I said, this could be an escape path out of consulting. I know a lot of freelancers don't want to be freelancing their whole life. They'd love to build products. They'd love to do what we're doing here. So how can we reframe this online event, this conference, to be specific to, in this case, to a freelancer? So what we did is when I emailed my list and when all these other partners emailed their lists, they personalized or they positioned, I guess, the event differently. Each of us positioned the event slightly differently depending on our audience. So there were people who sell to authors who talked, their focus was how you as an author can have a really massive book launch. People like me who sell to freelancers or cater to freelancers. How can the typical freelancer get into products and so on? So what we did is we worked with Tom and said, let's do something really, really simple. Let's say that if I send you traffic to your registration page, let's just change the headline to grow your freelancing business with new streams of income from products. And then if John Lee Dumas sends traffic, let's generate a year's worth of profit in a single month, learn how inside. If Steve Demick, who caters to authors, sends traffic, talk about how you can turn your book into a 6-figure revenue stream. So all we did was said, let's make an assumption about the audience that is on the receiving end of that email, and let's just change the headline. Let's just modify one thing to make it so they know they're at the right place. I mean, the goal of a headline is to get somebody to read further down the page. So the goal of this headline was to get somebody to read further down the page, so hopefully they'll in turn register for the summit. You got a 44% increase in registrations against the control just by changing the headline. So if you think about it, there's a lot of CRO hacks out there and different things you can do to increase conversions. 44% is pretty decent, especially when you consider that you're just saying, and it's pretty obvious, right? You're saying if somebody comes who fits this profile, fits this persona, let's just change out the headline and maybe switch out a testimonial or something like that to show them that they're at the right place. That this isn't, I mean, if they're reading an email that I sent them about escape freelancing, get into products and so on, and they click through to the page, and the page is all about, learn how to make your next product launch be more successful than your last, a lot of people might be thinking, well, there's a disconnect here. I've never launched a product. So we just made this hypothesis that if we change the headline to fit the audience, that it would help, and it actually ended up helping pretty significantly. So that's one strategy, and you see this a lot. Actually, before I get to that, one other thing that I want to show you, which is actually quite interesting. I know you can't really see this here, but this is within the back end of Drip, which is an email marketing app. What we've done here is we've made it so, depending on where somebody came from, so the audience that they belong to, so freelancer, author, or whatever else, along with even the business type that they run, we would then make it so the email that they got after registering for the summit would be a little more specific to them. So you remember before I had the mail merging example. And some of that actually is here, but what you can't really see easily here, unfortunately, on the slide, is what we're doing is we're saying if they are, in my case, solo or on their own, we're going to address them as a freelancer. If they specify in some way that they're a team, we're going to address them as an agency. And then if they tell us that they're a developer, we're now going to call them a freelance developer or a development agency, a designer, design agency, freelance designer, and so on. And what we're able to output is an email to them that says, I know that as a freelance designer, launching a new product or service can be intimidating. Where do I start? How do I make sure this will work for me? And so on. And then we're able to then conditionally inject content based on the audience they belong to. So if they're a freelancer, we've created this conference to help freelancers like you, blah, 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 blah. If they're an author, we've created this conference to help authors like you. And then at the end, we're able to do things like injecting, Brennan and I are looking forward to seeing exactly what impact this online summit will have on you. And what we've noticed is by doing this, by making it so both the registration page and the follow-up emails were a little more relevant to them, a little more specific to them and their needs, they were able to see not only a 45% increase in the total number of people who opt in, but engagement for people who actually show up and watch the summit, Tom told me was significantly higher, was something like 20%, just by making it so they feel like they're at the right place. And that's really what we're getting at is how can we get people to feel like they're at the right place? So how can we niche on the fly? How do we position what you're offering to be a little more relevant, a little more specific to the individual looking at it? So 45% is a good ballpark. But I want to show you some other examples. So this is ConvertKit. They get a lot of traffic from Pat Flynn, who runs Smart Passive Income. And what they've done is they've made it so instead of when Pat writes a review or links to ConvertKit, he doesn't have them go to the homepage. He doesn't have them go to this email marketing for online creators kind of generic homepage. Instead, when somebody from Pat's website clicks through, they get this one-off specific landing page that's email marketing for bloggers and entrepreneurs like you. There's a picture of Pat Flynn, who they trust because they were just on his site, a quote about what Pat thinks about ConvertKit, and so on. And this is the sort of thing that, regardless of, are you using personalization software or aren't you or anything like that, you should be thinking about this. If you have people reviewing your product and they're sending you traffic, think, like, what do we know about that audience? What kind of people read that review site or read that blog or whatever else? And can we include social proof from the person who wrote the review? Somebody wrote a review saying this product is amazing, and then they send you traffic, and then on your, say, your sign-up page, there's that person again reiterating, really, something positive they said in that review. You're going to make it so the people coming from that channel who trust that channel are going to think, okay, I'm at the right place, that there's continuity here. So that's really what we're talking about. And this is something that really any of us can do. ConvertKit, this is just a one-off landing page that they've made. So when they worked out a deal with, in this case, their main affiliate, Pat Flynn, they said, hey, instead of driving people to just convertkit.com, let's go here, let's send them here. And we've seen, we have one of our customers, Bookify, this is actually a really interesting story. They have online scheduling software, kind of like what Bridget has with You Can Book Me. They get a lot of traffic from Capterra, because they're apparently one of the top-rated scheduling software products listed on Capterra. When Capterra sends them traffic, they've changed that headline. So the default headline is something like, something about scheduling software. But when Capterra sends them traffic, they're saying that if the referring domain is capterra.com, let's make it say Capterra's highest rated scheduling software. And the impact from just changing that literal headline from Capterra traffic was a 289% increase in signups from that channel. So their control was 2.7% of people where it would come from Capterra and end up signing up. 7.8% from Capterra are signing up, again, just from changing a headline. And that's, if there's one thing I want to kind of continually re-stress throughout this talk, is we're talking about minor tweaks. We're talking about little changes that you can make that have, I mean, a 300% lift is pretty nice, especially if that's serious volume. Second strategy I want to cover is what are people searching for? And this is, I think, a really underutilized strategy that all of us could be using right now, especially if you're creating content, if you're doing any sort of content marketing or whatever in your site. So this is an article on onboarding that lives on one of my websites, W Freelancing. Gets a lot of Google traffic, and I have a content upgrade on this article. Now, a lot of us would have a content upgrade because we know they work, and this content upgrade would deliver the ebook or whatever else. But you can go a step further. You can say, what can we tell about somebody if they opt into this content upgrade? They probably have an issue with onboarding. They have some problem with bringing new clients on board. And we can remember that. We can do more than just deliver transactionally the ebook. We can store that, and we can kind of profile them in a way based on the fact that they opted in for this, or if they landed on this from Google. Google is not sending us keyword data any longer, but we can tell a lot by the landing page. If they land on an article on how do I start a freelancing business, well, this tells me they're probably not an agency. If somebody lands here as the very first page on my site, they're probably looking to just get started. So I can speak to them a bit differently than the person who opts in or lands originally on an article about how do I go, scale my freelancing business or something like that. So what we could be looking at, and this is just an exercise of looking at your Google Search Console, going into there, looking at the landing or the pages that Google's sending traffic to, and just inferring, like, what can we tell about somebody if they land on this article versus that article? And what you can do is you can do a lot of really interesting things. So I'm on W Freelancing, when somebody opts into my primary lead magnet, which is an email course, notice I don't have the checkbox just yet here. I ask people both their name and what do they do. So are you a designer, are you a developer, and so on. And what I'm able to do with this is I'm able to, I'll show you examples of how I use this data in a bit, but I'm able to develop a profile over time about who somebody is. But I go a step further because what I'm able to do now is if a web design blog sends me traffic, say a web design blog is writing about links to some article I wrote about proposals, I just assume that somebody coming from that domain is probably a web designer. And then, no, they're not going to see this. So if you come from a web design blog to an article on my site, and then eventually you hit my homepage or something like that, you're not going to be asked that. Instead, you're going to be shown what I call a dynamic call to action. So dynamic call to action is really, if you think about why content upgrades work. Content upgrades work because they're super relevant. They're super specific. If I'm reading an article on starting a business, and there's some get a checklist on how to start a business, those convert really well, often 10, 15% or so, compared to the control, the usual join my newsletter, which gets maybe 2% of people opting into that. So dynamic call to actions kind of fit in the middle. They're not exactly a content upgrade, but they're not a universally boring global lead magnet. So what does that mean? Well, let's say that web design blog I talked about before sends traffic to me, and then that visitor starts to read articles about proposals. Well, I can infer that they're probably a designer, and they probably have an issue with proposals. So when they're reading an article or they go back to my homepage, they're going to see a universal call to action that says designers, find out how to close more proposals. When they go to my homepage, designers write winning proposals. I reposition the lead magnet, the email course, based on basically telling them, hey, this is who I think you are. This is probably the issue you have. Here's how I can help. And what this has done is we've had a 252% increase in overall anonymous conversions by doing this. By getting so again, the ideal would be to have content upgrades for each article on the site. That's time consuming. That's where I would like to get to eventually. But at this point, by having this kind of interim strategy of saying, what can I tell based on behavior, where they came from, and what they're reading? How can I reposition? How can I redescribe the lead magnet to make it so it's more appropriate for them? Third strategy, and this is, any of you do paid acquisition or running ads on AdWords or Facebook or anything like that? Okay, cool. So the rule of thumb is typically if you have an ad, the landing page it links to should mirror that ad. So one ad, one landing page. This is something when I first got into PPC stuff well over a decade ago, this was the thing my first employer bashed into my head. Like one landing page, one ad. The problem is this doesn't scale that well. So let's say that so this is Teamwork. I know the company. I think they're based actually in Ireland. Let's say that they have project management software, and let's say they're running this hypothetical ad campaign where one set of ads is targeting agencies, the other is targeting SaaS. So you might have these two different ads, and then they break them down, let's say, further and say, we're going to have different ad variations. So this is targeting SaaS, but one of them will talk about building the next big app, blah, blah, blah. The other will talk about startup founders, blah, blah, blah. The problem is if you really want to maintain that one ad, one landing page mantra, you're going to end up having a lot of landing pages. You could potentially, depending on how nuanced your ads get, if you have really specific targeting with really specific ad copy and variations and so on, you could end up with potentially hundreds of different potential landing pages. So one thing that we've seen people use personalization for is to make it, this is a kind of a badly designed example, unfortunately, but to make it so that literally if the ad says X, Y, Z, I'm going to personalize it for where I am, then the landing page should say X, Y, Z, right? And if the ad is targeting a certain demographic or a certain type of person, say a marketing person versus a technical person, you can make it so the language becomes more marketing-ish versus more technical. And this is one of those things that really makes sense when you think about it, right? Like if they're clicking an ad that effectively is having them self-segment. They're saying if this ad is being served to me and this ad is targeting marketing people, and I click that ad, there's a damn good chance that that person clicking that ad is a marketer. So what if you could just change things like the social proof on the landing page, or the way you describe the offer, or the headline, or even the image, or something like that? Well, that's exactly what this one company did. They were able to, so their call to action is basically getting consultation requests. This company drives about $4,000 to $5,000 a month of ads, or they spend about $4,000 to $5,000 a month on ads to their site. And this campaign has been up since 2012, I think. So it's a pretty solid, tested. They were getting about a 20-ish% conversion rate consistently over the years. And all they did was they changed language and the feature check marks based on the ad and the targeting of that ad. And they were able to increase consultation requests by 109%. So it's a matter of, would you spend some time? They spent 40 minutes doing this, I think. Would you spend about 40 minutes to effectively make it so $4,000 to $5,000 of ad spend is the equivalent of $8,000 to $10,000 of ad spend? Probably. Intercom, a lot of us know them. They did the same thing. They ended up hiring actually a sales engineer to build some software that churned out hundreds of variations of this one kind of page where the copy speaks to the original search query that the ad was triggered by, product images showcasing the relevant features that are relevant to the person who that ad is targeting, and so on. And they were able to get a 300% increase in overall, what are they optimizing for? Trials, so trial requests from paid traffic. So this is another thing where, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. It's exactly what we would do if I'm at a conference and I'm at a marketing conference and somebody asks me what I do and asks me about what I sell. I'm going to describe it differently to them than if I'm at a PHP conference the next week. So we all do this. Again, it's just making it so how can we think through things like, in this case, who's the ad targeting? What copy intrigued them, and what can we do about that? Fourth strategy is to ask people what they want from you and to react to that. So we did a survey of our early adopters and asked them, how do you currently segment? About 75% of them said we only segment by customer versus non-customer. And those were the only ways that they did any sort of profiling on their list. They didn't do any surveying, and if they did surveying, they didn't actually take that feedback and store it on their records so we can find out a bit more about who they are, what kind of business they run, job title, business stage, and so on. But the good news is there's a lot of really nice ways to progressively profile and enrich our leads, our subscribers. So Clearbit's a great one. Clearbit allows you to pass up an email address and get back data about the industry that their company's in, how big their company is, a lot of data that is more or less public that you can then use this data and do things with it. So if if it comes back with this is a SaaS company, now this person goes back to your website, show them testimonials from other SaaS companies you've helped. Versus an e-commerce company, we'll see testimonials from other e-commerce companies you've helped. Opt-in-form questions. So when you're capturing a lead, you could ask questions about like, what is the main struggle that you have right now that you need help with? And that could be 4 different options. And you can use that to speak to them a bit differently. So if they tell you, hey, I'm looking to just start a business. Well, how can you send them more relevant content about helping them start and grow a business versus somebody who is saying, I've got a business that's doing well, I want to bring it to the next level, I want to scale it. They're going to expect different content, different ways of describing what it is you offer. Trigger links are a great way to do this too. So these are links that are in emails that, if clicked, can write data to their records. So you could have almost like an embedded survey in an email that says, Pat Flynn does this with one of his onboarding emails where he asks you, which best describes you? I don't make any money online. I make less than $500 a month online, or I make above $500 a month online. And depending on which one you click, that's going to change the, in his case, just the emails you get sent. But that could also play into things like, well, when they're on our sales page, how do we speak to somebody who has not yet started a bit differently than somebody who has started? Assessments, quizzes are a great way of doing this too. So we actually released something called Value My Funnel 2-3 weeks back, and what it does is it's kind of an assessment that helps people figure out their funnel valuations, and we end up collecting a lot of data from that lets us better serve, better create messaging to fit the people who have completed that survey. Or even on-site behavior. So what articles are they reading? What pages have they viewed, and so on. And you can kind of develop a profile about who somebody is, and over time be able to know quite a bit about somebody's both behavior and explicit data that they've given you. But what do you do with this data once you have it? So I go back to that kind of funnel that I showed you before that I call it a segmentation workflow, where as you compile data, you can use this to do things like store custom field information in your email marketing app that is nothing but an internal indicator about things like what should you be promoting them next. So maybe you have a lineup of different products. You could say, if they've told me that they're solo and haven't yet started, maybe promote X if they haven't bought X. And then if they're an agency and they're doing well, then promote Y. And you can do these different kind of conditional things. If you use your email marketing app as like the single source of truth about who somebody is, what they've told you, and what does that mean about how you can best serve them, you can then use your email marketing app and then do interesting things with this. So I know it's really hard. This should not have been. I'll send you guys the slides if you're interested that have a little more detail. But what this is this is my own internal segmentation workflow that determines what should they be promoted next. Based on what they've bought, what they've told me, and how they're behaving, what should they get promoted next? And what this allows me to do is I have weekly newsletters that go out. And the PSs on these newsletters are dynamically generated based off of what they should be promoted next. When they go to my site, if they click on the newsletter I get and go to my site, when they see call to actions on the articles on my site, if they're already on my list, first off, they're never going to see an opt-in, which is a huge thing, which is something that everyone should be doing. If you get an email from somebody and you click on the link that they sent you, and then you get hit with an exit pop-up saying, what's your email address? That is a really bad user experience. And what should be happening instead is showing something a little more relevant to them. So what I've been able to do is I've been able to make it so I have this offer funnel that, again, depending on where you are, like what Aaron talked about yesterday with that awareness funnel, depending on where somebody is, how problem aware they are they product aware, have they bought product A, maybe now they need product B, maybe you can then offer to upgrade to annual or upgrade to your higher tier plan. A lot of different things you can do. And one of my favorite things that I've done, and this is something that I've tried to get anyone who does any sort of like email course creation or anything to do, is to do something like this. So if you have an email course and the goal of that email course is to help educate somebody towards becoming a customer, very first email, question 1, why did you join this course? And what this allows you to do is you can capture why they joined and then what's holding them back? What are they planning on doing next? So in this case, I have a 9-lesson email course. On the first email that they get, the first lesson, at the end of it, I ask, are you just starting out? Are you doing okay, but you want to start selling on value? Or you've been struggling to close proposals? So over time, I've talked to enough people to realize these are the 3 core reasons that people have joined my email list. And this used to be just a PS at the end. Hey, reply and tell me a bit about who you are and what you want. And these were the 3 consistent themes that kept coming back. So I ask this question. They click, I'm just starting out. I write a custom field to their subscriber record. And then they get a bunch of other lessons. And then later on, I ask them, when they're near the end of it, what's holding you back at this point? And then maybe nothing. This has helped me figure out what my issue is. I need to work on building out a playbook. I need to work on how I write my proposals, and so on. And I'm able to combine this data to make it so when they get pitched on the course, so there's an evergreen course pitch, and they go to the sales page, I take into account who they are or what they want, why they joined. So if they joined because they're struggling to close proposals, now this course is all about how can they better close proposals. And then when I get down, you can't see it here, but when I get down to the offer, if they say my next goal is to really systematize how I go about selling, the way I describe how the product will specifically benefit them will be with that in mind. If they are an agency and a marketer, every instance of the word freelancer on this page becomes a marketing agency. And what this has done for me, it's increased sales through this funnel by 66%. And this is permanent. This is something I set up once. It's running now. It's been up and running for months now. And I'm pretty happy with that, considering what are the other things you could do to increase sales by something like that. So again, it's all I'm doing is I'm trying to reframe how this will benefit them based on the data that they've willingly and voluntarily given me. All right, so the last strategy I want to cover is tell me what to do next. So I mentioned earlier about the dynamic PSs. And one thing that a really good pattern is if you are sending out, say, newsletters to your list, having some sort of offer funnel where you could say, if they're not, say they're a subscriber, obviously because they're getting your emails. If they're not a customer, get them to start a trial. If they are going through a trial, get them to watch your pre-recorded webinar that will hopefully get them to convert. If they are a customer, maybe get them to upgrade or get them to go to your annual plan or something like that. And maybe if they've churned, maybe ask them to come back and try it again, right? Because a lot of people, even though they might cancel or something like that, they might still be getting your content. They might still be interested in what you have to share. But you can make it so as you do these mass scalar emails, the thing that you're kind of nudging them to do in each email is respective of where they are in your funnel, where they are, if they haven't, if they haven't started a trial, you want to get them to do that, and so on. And this can go to your website too. So once they're on your website, you could do different things like, I'll skip through this. You could do different things like, in this case, this is fizzle.com or fizzle.co. They make it so if you're on my email list and you just clicked on an email that I just sent you, you're not going to see that thing at the top. Why? What's the point in seeing that? They're actually now working on making it so the left side, which is the people who are on their email list, will see a trial call to action, start your free trial. And those people who have already started a free trial will see something else. So the idea is you can have this kind of offer funnel where instead of trying to throw every possible thing you want that somebody to do or have that somebody could do on your website, you tell them the one thing that based on what you know about them, what should they do next? If they're anonymous, you want them on your list. If they're a subscriber, you want to get them to start a trial. Trialing, you want to get them to convert. Already converted, you want to get them to upgrade, and so on. This is an example of one of our customers who they did something relatively simple. They made it so if you are anonymous, I think it's, yeah, if you are anonymous, they've stripped down their navigation, so there's very little that somebody can do except click Start Now. If you come back, you see a lot of other options. But what this has done is it's made it so people who visit the join page, which is the thing they want people to do, people who are anonymous, they've increased the soft conversion rate of people going from the home page to the Start Now page by about 55% just by reducing complexity, just by getting rid of superfluous stuff that's distracting. That's something to think about is how can you, if you have a lot of different things, if you have like the typical, say you have a blog and you have like an email opt-in and then you have a start a trial ad thing and all these different things competing for somebody's attention, think about how you can streamline things and make it so you just show somebody something relevant to them based on where they are in your overall funnel. Way back when I started doing this back in 2012, I did something very simple back when I was writing PlanScope. My hypothesis was if you go to my blog and you read an article, say from Google, you're probably, if you're reading a thing on how do you justify higher rates, having a call to action that start a trial of this project management tool, that's a really poor call to action because these are people who are not yet, they don't yet know that they have a project management problem, right? So what I ended up doing was made it so if they're anonymous, I want them on this email course. And then I ended up actually getting them more towards a info product funnel versus SaaS. Because my end strategy was get people on my list, get them to then transactionally buy a one-off book, and then later on get them to buy the software. But I was able to make it so I was producing content weekly. So every week when somebody got content, depending on where they were in my funnel, that sidebar would change. And that was really, this is what got me down this path. And this was 6 years back or so. The big objection that people have to going down this route is this seems like a lot of work. It seems like I need to go remap my whole content strategy. I need to think through all of my different personas and come up with segments and all these different things. What I would encourage you to do would be to start really small. Start with one simple thing. The best thing you can do that your users will like you for a lot would be if they're on your list, stop showing opt-ins, especially if you have slide-ups and welcome mats and pop-ups and all these annoying things. If they're on your list, get rid of them. There's if they opt in again, they're probably they could give you a different email address. They could mistype their email. Now you have 2 records for one human being, which is not a good thing to do. So I'd encourage you to start small, minor things, and let these stack. Let these changes stack on top of each other. Because what you're going to see is that over time, the relevancy of and the performance of both your emails and your website are going to start to slowly tick up. Because what you're able to do is you're able to now start thinking, well, how can I think through why somebody might land on this piece of content? And what can I then do based on having that info? How can I speak a little differently to them? How can I, what would I do if I was in person meeting with this person who I know this, and this about? How would I redescribe what it is I'm offering to them? So small tweaks can yield big results, and stacking a bunch of small tweaks really does change everything. I mean, when you look at, some of the numbers I showed you now, they were good numbers, but on average, we're seeing people who do things like what I described, at a minimum, are getting about a 20 to 40% lift, which, considering the effort that usually goes into getting anything like that, it's a pretty good payoff. Because, and again, it's psychologically rooted. It's just saying, look, people want the product or service seemingly made just for them. So if you can help them see how your thing will help them better by showing things like testimonials from other people in their industry, or using language that is different if they're a marketer versus a technical person and so on, or depending on their business stage, changing different things. Tons of uses in the B2B space. So especially if you're doing any sort of B2B product or service, highly consider looking into doing this kind of stuff. We're launching something called Write next week. We're going to make it free for anyone in this room. And what it is, it's kind of like if if you've ever used Hello Bar or one of those kind of things at the top of your website, it's like that, but it's aware of where somebody's in your funnel, so it'll integrate with your email marketing app, and you can just say like, if they're anonymous, we want to get them on our list. If they're a subscriber, we want to get them to start a trial and so on. And we've designed it to hopefully get people set up within just a few minutes. But yeah, we want to offer it to you guys for free. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Brennan.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the questions that have come through Twitter, and then we'll go to the audience. Okay. So first question, personalization and conversion rate optimization techniques are great, but practically it's super challenging to execute and maintain. Mm-hmm. In our personal experience, even simple things like A/B testing, form analysis, etc., all gets unattended after the launch. What are your thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because if you have it running and you kind of forget that you're changing the headline to be this for this segment, that can go stale kind of quickly, and that is a concern. What I would say, though, regarding A/B testing specifically, is with A/B testing, you're usually saying, I have a headline that's working or doing okay. I want to try this other thing that I think might work better. And you typically need high volume to actually see if it's significant or not. What's nice about this is you're really just saying, like, it's a matter of copywriting, if you really think about it. It's saying what's hard is to write copy that speaks to literally everyone equally. What's easier is to write copy that says, hey, if they're in this industry, let's just literally throw, pricing for finance companies on the pricing page versus pricing, or something like that. But it's just a matter of, like, yeah, I mean, it's like with any content strategy. You should have an idea of what do you have in place, what are the different things you have up and running. And ideally, though, as long as you're not doing radical restructurings of, say, your marketing site or whatever else, once it's up, and it doesn't necessarily go stale unless you, say, change your whole site template and then you forget about some stuff that's running or whatever else. So you definitely want to keep an eye on it, but it's not, unlike with A/B testing, it's not something that, it's not as much of an experiment as much as it is just making it so that your copy is more targeted.
Mm-hmm. So you say you need a high amount of traffic for context. What would you describe as like enough to start seeing, I guess?
I mean, we have services companies that get like a few dozen people a month to their site, but they're selling, their average customer value is in the, 6 figures. It's a matter of if you get one more. Again, with A/B testing, you really need a lot of data to justify that it's working. With this, you're just saying, what would I say differently to somebody on the phone if they called in, if they were in this industry versus that industry?
So the argument is that it's going to improve it every time. You don't really
generally, unless you don't know that audience, and you're like, if it's in finance and you're talking about medical stuff or something, that probably wouldn't work.
No, that makes sense. So next question was, does it, and then it, presume this means personalization, or on-page personalization, does it affect SEO performance?
No.
I think it doesn't.
No, because to drive these changes, you need to have context about who somebody is. And with SEO, it's literally like incognito mode direct to a page. So we look at things like, based on data stored in your CRM, what do we change? Well, Googlebot isn't going to have that data, right? So there's no effect.
So you're not physically changing the page, it's dynamic based
Correct.
on...
It's basically what we're doing. I mean, there's different ways of doing it, but the way we're doing it is we're post-processing the page that the server sends back.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions? Wilco, you can go first.
Yeah, right. So how many different unique BSs do you have in your automation? Like, do you repeat the same BS messages?
So I have 5 different stages, and then I have 3 variations, and I just have a random number generator that every week will pick one of the 3 that they're in. So I mean, you could get the same one, every week, but ideally it does mix up a bit. If I had a lot of time, I would love to have like a huge list of rotating things or something. So it's really all the logic is saying, if they're in this stage, here are the options, and then I have a random number generator and I pick one. And so it's based off the current timestamp. So yeah, just kind of hopefully it'll change week to week. Yeah.
Cool. Next question.
Hey, so what can you do when people are accessing your site from a mobile, from iPad, from their computer? So what are the options for that?
Well, a few things. I mean, an easy example of that would be if, say, you have a mobile app. If you have Android and an iOS version, you could say if they're on an iOS device, just link to the App Store. If they're on Android, link to the Play Store. But you could also do different things like, I haven't done enough, to be honest, testing around like what are some interesting patterns you could do mobile versus desktop. But a hypothesis would be people generally don't like filling in forms as much on mobile as they do desktop. It's easier to type on a laptop than it is on a phone. So you could do something like maybe minimize data collection on mobile, whereas ask more. Yeah.
I also meant, so if I already said that I'm a designer on my computer, but I haven't said that on mobile.
Oh, good question. Okay, so how do you link the two? Yeah, okay, so this is what's really cool about it. So if you use your email marketing app as a single source of truth, when somebody opts in, say, on their mobile, that device is now linked to that new subscriber record. So you opt in, your record 12345. Now there's a pointer from your browsing device or your device to that record, right? So we can pull and push to that. But now let's say that you get an email from me that goes and you read it on your desktop. In that email, say there's a link back to my site. That link will include an identifying info about your subscriber 12345. So you click over on your desktop now, and now your desktop is pointing to that same subscriber record that your phone is pointing to. So then you're able to have this kind of, if you treat like your email marketing app as a user stable, and then the opting in or clicking on a link that's sent to you as an authentication event, when you look at it like that, then it becomes, I mean, it's obviously not foolproof. You could go incognito or whatever else and you lose that. But that's typically how people have multiple devices linked to that same kind of user record, if that makes sense. So that's typically what, that's what we do. So, yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Ooh, we have one.
First of all, thank you for coming. Fantastic presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
So on the one ad, one landing page concept,
yeah.
You discuss changing the headings. So to what extent would you maybe change the content as well?
So a few things. So a customer who does fitness products, and there's a very demographically a 25-year-old woman should probably be seeing something different than a 55-year-old man when it comes to success, like results and so on. So you could change things like social proof. So if you're running an ad that's targeting women who are in their 20s, you could say when they click through, we're going to have a picture of a 20-something-year-old woman there who has gotten results from this, whereas a split second later, an older gentleman clicks on an ad, and he's seeing somebody like him who has succeeded from this. So that's one way of doing that, right, where you're changing things like social proof and so on. But you could even go further. You could do like, you need a budget. They do a lot of webinars, and these webinars are effectively the same webinar, except they'll have one targeting like real estate agents, one targeting like military families and so on. And all they do is they make it so on their registration landing page, they change the background image to be, if it's military, it'll be like a military family type thing, have it all patriotic and stuff. If they're targeting like teachers, like how can teachers budget, it'll be like a picture of like a classroom or something. And it's just, the idea is just making it so they think that they're at the right place. Like, oh wow, this is a webinar that's made just for me. And all they do on these webinars is they change out the examples during the webinar to be, more, I mean, it's the same budgeting advice. It's just different examples used and so on. So yeah, I mean, headlines I think are kind of the minimum, because that just increases engagement. That keeps people staying on the page. But you can also look at things like modifying the call to action, modifying social proof, and all these different things that contribute to increased engagement. So yeah.
Cool. Probably got time for like 2 more questions, if any others. Anyone? Ooh.
Don't need the microphone.
Yeah.
Have you seen people like taking personalization further? So especially in the B2B space, using like actually using the name, the brand, instead of
Yeah, so that's called account-based marketing. We're doing things like, hey Bob from London or something like that. That tends to be pretty good if you're doing. We have one customer who's doing almost like a report where you fill out this 17-question survey, and then the redirect is to a page that is basically it's what you would do, like, typically you'd code that, but he ended up doing it through our software in this case. But what he ended up doing was he made it so the report is highly tailored to, like, it doesn't ask for your name, but it asks for things like, information about your weight and so on, and does it that way. But yeah, you can do, for account-based marketing, the problem I have with that is it can be a little, like, if you're not getting somebody to actually tell you their name and you're just using Clearbit to pull it, there's always a risk that, it's actually a negative effect, I think, if you get that wrong. It's one thing if you're just saying, instead of a mixed bag of testimonials, I think they're probably a retail company, so we're going to show retail testimonials. That's safe, but if you say, hey, you are a retail company, and make that front and center, if you're not sure about that, that could be more harmful than it is good. So, yeah, especially things like geolocation, that's always tricky if you say, like, how's life in London, and they're actually in New York, but for whatever reason their IP address thinks it's London or something. So, but it does have its uses. Especially if you're doing, we have people who do direct outreach, and they're doing things like, let's say you are reaching out to a lead who's a CMO at a certain company, and whatever, it could be like their homepage could literally say, here's how we could help FE International double their sales, and then it's like M&A stuff or something, right? Yeah, so, yeah.
Cool. One more question, if anyone has one question.
Thanks. So with personalization, how would you handle overlapping audiences?
So if they belong to, like, both audiences?
Yeah, so for example, let's say you had an advert running on Facebook, but you already knew they were a fitness trainer, and they happened to both change the background image you wanted to. How would you handle that?
Yeah, so the way technically what we're doing is we have, like, the first match wins. So you would have, like, a what we call a group of segments, and then whichever one is triggered first ends up getting, changed. But sometimes, well, there's that, but there's also, the thing that I think is really interesting is when you start thinking, let's say you change one element based off the ad targeting and the headline based on the ad copy, and you could potentially have, like, hundreds of variations, right? That possible, even though you just have a few different, like, 10 by 10 becomes 100 potential variations there. So that's more of the stacking approach, but in terms of the overlapping, yeah, we wouldn't, like, what we've technically done is make it so the first one that registers is the one we're going to go with, and we'll ignore the others.